Your paycheck just landed in your account. The number increases, and for a brief second, everything feels under control. Then your brain quietly starts assigning every dollar a job. Nothing has physically left your account yet, but mentally, the money is already gone. This entire process happens in less than 15 seconds. You start telling yourself this month might feel easier. Maybe you can relax just a little, even though no bills have actually been paid yet. The problem is not that your salary is too small. The problem is your money already has directions attached to it, and most of those directions do not benefit your future. This channel is not about getting rich quickly. It is about understanding how money actually behaves over time. And today, we break down why your paycheck disappears before you even use it. Most people think they have a spending problem, but the pattern is usually deeper than that. It's not about discipline, it's about the absence of a system. A paycheck feels like a reward for surviving the month, not like a tool designed for allocation. That framing quietly shapes every decision after. When money feels like a bonus, behavior follows that logic. Spending becomes more emotional than intentional, and bonuses are rarely protected for long-term use. Every month repeats the same quiet cycle. Income arrives, life continues, and the balance fades. The disappearance feels normal because it is predictable. The real issue is rarely the size of income, it's the direction of money over time. Without direction, even stable income experiences financial drift. Two people can earn the same salary, yet their outcomes diverge over a long-term horizon. The difference is rarely luck, it's structure. One person waits to see what remains. The other assigns purpose before spending begins. That single shift compounds quietly over time. Saving what is left sounds reasonable. But leftover money is highly volatile, and volatility often results in zero. We start with a basic reality most people avoid. Many people cannot clearly track where their money actually goes each month. They rely on hope instead of systems, even when risk builds over time. The visible parts feel under control at first. Bills are paid, food is covered, and subscriptions continue quietly in the background. It creates a false sense of stability over a short time horizon. But the remaining money slowly disappears in small amounts. Each expense feels insignificant in isolation and avoids attention. Over time, this creates an invisible drawdown on your finances. This pattern is not random or accidental. Modern consumption systems are designed to encourage continuous spending behavior. They quietly exploit attention and reduce awareness over the long term. A small coffee here and a small subscription there feels harmless. Discounts make spending feel like a smart decision instead of a cost. But compounding works the same way on expenses over time. Then the total finally becomes visible all at once. Around $200 disappears without a clear memory attached. This repeated pattern reduces long-term financial flexibility. The issue is not personal weakness or lack of discipline. It is a lack of awareness interacting with a highly optimized system. In that environment, the system usually wins. Your money is not truly disappearing into nothing. It is simply being redirected without your intention or planning. And over a long time horizon, that difference becomes everything. Financially successful people are not smarter. They are just more consistent and often a bit boring. That consistency quietly reduces volatility in their financial life over time. They do not wait to see what is left. They decide allocation the moment income arrives. The first seconds define the entire time horizon of that money. The idea itself is simple, but almost no one follows it consistently because it does not feel rewarding in the short term. Yet this is where the shift begins. Money starts working quietly in the background. Compounding does not look exciting, but it changes direction over time. They pay themselves first. Then they deal with the rest of the world. That small reversal changes risk exposure over time. It looks like a small decision, but the effect stretches across decades. Time horizon turns small habits into large outcomes. Every month presents the same decision. Spend fully now or stabilize the future. Most people underestimate long-term drawdown from small habits. Most people choose the present, then slowly feel the pressure later. And they rarely notice when the pattern actually began. Now we move into numbers, not opinions. This is where assumptions get uncomfortable, because real math doesn't negotiate with feelings. If more than 60% of your income goes to basic needs, your margin disappears. That means your time horizon shrinks without you noticing. You're not building, you're stabilizing. The problem is this starts to feel normal. Repetition turns pressure into routine, and routine hides financial risk in plain sight. The definition of needs quietly expands over time. Lifestyle inflation hides inside reasonable language. What feels necessary is often just upgraded preference. Expensive choices get renamed as necessities. Daily habits start to bypass critical thinking. Over time, small decisions compound into structural weight. Compounding doesn't only work for investments. It also applies to spending patterns over time. Repeated behavior builds long-term outcomes, whether intentional or not. Without noticing, you design a life with high fixed costs. That increases your exposure to financial volatility. Your system becomes fragile under small disruptions. It's not that your income is too small, it's that your structure requires too much support, and over time, that imbalance creates repeated drawdowns. Now imagine this scenario clearly. You suddenly lose your job without warning. How long can your current savings realistically sustain your life? Most people do not even have 1 month saved. Not because they are lazy or careless, but because time and structure were never on their side. Every dollar already has a destination. Expenses are assigned before saving even begins. That is how the trap quietly forms over time. That is why emergency funds feel unexciting. There is no visible short-term return or reward, but they quietly reduce risk across your entire time horizon. The common benchmark is 3 to 6 months of living costs. It is not designed for growth or compounding. It exists to absorb financial drawdowns in uncertain periods. People who have this buffer behave differently. Their decisions are less reactive to short-term volatility, and that changes how they experience everyday life. It is not about being rich or ahead. It is about having optionality when situations change. And optionality is one of the most undervalued financial assets. Money does not always create freedom, but the absence of it increases pressure in every decision, and that pressure compounds quietly over time. After stability, money finally gets a chance to grow. This is where many people arrive too late. Not because they failed, but because they delayed the start. Most people are not confused about investing. They are waiting for the perfect moment. The problem is that moment never shows up. Investing is not about being smarter than others. It is about starting earlier than your own excuses. Time horizon matters more than intelligence here. Time is the dominant factor in compounding, not the size of your income, not the complexity of your strategy. Delaying 10 years has a cost that feels invisible. The loss happens quietly through missed compounding, and it adds up to a large gap over the long term. The people who benefit most from starting early often wait the longest. They feel the highest risk because of limited resources, so they delay and miss the advantage. People think they need to feel ready first, but readiness is not a requirement. Most progress starts before confidence appears. In money, speed often beats perfection. Small imperfect actions compound over time, and perfection usually arrives too late to matter. The biggest problem is not your system. It is your consistency over time, and consistency cannot rely on motivation. Motivation fades faster than you expect. Fatigue quietly replaces discipline, and that is when poor decisions feel reasonable. People do not fail because they lack knowledge. They fail because they must decide every day, and decision fatigue compounds over time. The solution is not stronger discipline. It is removing the need to decide. Systems work better when emotions are not involved. Automation creates distance from impulse. Money moves based on rules, not mood, and that changes long-term outcomes. The biggest risk is not the market, it is you on a bad day, especially when emotions override long-term thinking. A good system does not need motivation. It continues regardless of your mood, even during periods of low energy or drawdown. If your money depends on motivation, it will always lose. Short-term desire beats long-term planning, and that cycle quietly repeats. Your problem isn't laziness. It's not a lack of intelligence either. You're just operating without a system that protects your money over time. Systems are not built in big moments. They are shaped through small decisions you barely notice. And those decisions quietly define your long-term financial direction. Like the first 15 seconds after your paycheck arrives, it feels insignificant and easy to ignore, but it quietly sets your risk and spending behavior for the entire month. Financial security is not about being the richest person. It's about reducing volatility before problems show up. The people who feel stable are simply the ones who prepared earlier. If the way you see money shifted today, that's enough. No dramatic change is required right now. But over a long-term horizon, small shifts like this tend to compound.